Reject magic, turn to curse energy. Before we hop into this discussion on how excited I am for Jujutsu Kaisen, please do me a favor and drop your own thoughts on Jujutsu Kaisen in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? Zach the Pencil here, and yes, it's finally that time. So I did get caught up in Jujutsu Kaisen a while ago, like a while ago, like so bad that now it's on one of the many manga I wait for weekly because I love doing this to myself. Instead of reading completed stories, I read ongoing stories, and I just get impatient, and I don't know why I do this to myself. But getting back on track, let's talk about Jujutsu Kaisen. So, since I'm caught up, and since the anime is over, I did actually want to start talking about it a lot more. Been kind of itching. There are certain things I want to do, and this is sort of like the prelude. Think of this as the welcome into Jujutsu Kaisen onto the channel formally. Because technically I already did something like this when I called Jujutsu Kaisen great. I think it is great, and honestly, it's one of the few anime that I actually think lives up to the hype decently well, though I do have some problems with it, some perks with it. Let's talk about that, in fact. So, since I'm caught up, and since the anime is over, I won't talk about the manga. I won't talk about the manga in depth. I will simply address the anime up to the point where I believe it ends, and hopefully I don't accidentally spoil the manga. So, like, possibly manga spoilers, but I doubt I'll mention it. I will try not to mention it. So if you're here from the anime, welcome. We're gonna have a good time. But basically, if I had to describe Jujutsu Kaisen in one word, it would have to be sizable. And what do I mean by that? So I mean that Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole has an interesting amount of content to it. And I mean content in terms of characters, I mean content in terms of a power system, I mean content in terms of abilities, I mean content in terms of story, I mean content. It's very sizable. A little too sizable at times, but we're going to talk about the positives first. So let's talk about characters. I think Jujutsu Kaisen is very, very good at filling character roles, as in, we have a good protagonist, we have a good side character, we have another good side character, who shockingly enough have a decent female lead, we have great mentor type characters, but not necessarily great mentors. Like, Gojo is a good character, but mentor, I mean, kind of. He took care of Megumi, so I guess. But there are here's the thing. If I had to describe Jujutsu Kaisen, it has a lot of, like, it's very... See, it's weird when I pick sizable as the word, because I feel like I've seen Jujutsu Kaisen in a lot of places, but at the same time, I've never seen Jujutsu Kaisen before. Like, I recognize a lot of things about Jujutsu Kaisen, but in a good way. Like, this is a shonen manga, and I can feel that in every inch of its bones. It's a shonen anime too, regardless of whichever you came from. However, this is one of the few cases where I say that's a good thing, because it's very familiar despite being very dissimilar. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you can pick up Jujutsu Kaisen, and you're going to feel at home while entering a whole new home. It's like you're moving to a new house, but it feels like you've already been there. It's like a mean sense of deja vu while reading Jujutsu Kaisen, but in a good way. Like, it's not a ripoff of really anything. Like, there are aspects that you'll see, like the special eyes, this super powerful main character of the demon inside, but what the author does, what Akutami Sensei does, is he takes those things that he knows you're familiar with, and he flips them in very, very interesting ways that you haven't seen before. So it's easy to walk in, and it's hard to leave, because you feel like, wow, this is something good I've seen before, but it's being done in a new, interesting way here that makes you want to keep reading it. Like, our main characters, wonderful people. However, the main thing that I love about all of them, really, is that they're all people. They still have human facets to them. That's the one thing I have trouble with other main characters, where they feel a lot more like symbols, and a lot less like people who are, like, almost too good for their respective world. But then, you meet someone like Yuji Itadori, who's a menace when he needs to be. Like, you've even in the anime, you've seen he's a menace. I can tell you in the manga, y'all anime watchers, y'all ain't seen anything yet. That's what I like. I like it when characters are allowed to be characters, when they're allowed to feel human. Gojo, you've already seen that. That man's a menace. Once again, wait till you get to the manga. He has a very, very interesting storyline, and I think even in the anime, they showed off some of that. All of his abilities, and another thing I like. See, I plan to talk about all these things individually over the course of the month a little bit, so I am trying to hold back on a lot of my character stuff, because I am planning to talk about this. But basically, for characters, fantastic. They're very familiar, but at the same time, they're very different. I'm shocked to say that, let me see, is there a single character I don't like? No. However, shockingly enough, I think I will spoil my favorite character. My favorite character, it's a constant fistfight. I'll see when I decide to actually rank the characters. It's a constant fistfight between Todo and Gojo. I don't know. It's a consistent ever-evolving fist fight in my head, and I don't know who's gonna win. I know who would actually win in a fight, but I don't know who's gonna win this fist fight for my favorite character spot. They're pretty darn amazing. All the characters, I'd say, wonderful job. Akutame Sensei, fantastic job at doing what you do. Keep it up. I like the character work. I like the character designs. And speaking of design, I think, despite what people say, obviously the anime is amazingly animated. Like, once again, I don't watch anime that much, but when I saw some of these fights, you know, I just had to. I just had to. They look too good. So, obviously, Mappa did a fantastic job with the anime, but even the original manga art, which a lot of people tend not to like, they say the art is one of the weakest parts of Jujutsu Kaisen. I feel like the gritty nature of it, especially when the first chapters in the manga, becomes more stylized towards the grit, rough-looking aesthetic later on in the manga. But I think that adds to the world itself. The art actually supplements the rougher nature of the story, because honestly, the story is pretty darn dark from rip, as y'all saw. So I think Jujutsu Kaisen does a fantastic balance of figuring out where it needs to go dark, where it needs to go light, what happens here, what happens there. All of that perfect, healthy balance is really, really good with the artwork, because just as you see the rough sketch lines pop through whenever Yuji goes to swing his fist, it matches who he's punching, because they're characters in a dark world, in a dark, realistic world, drawn in a dark, interesting, realistic way, and I think all that's great. Honestly, I struggle with the art style. Like, that's a weird thing, because whenever I draw Jujutsu Kaisen, which I do on occasion, I see that there are certain lines there that I would have erased just to make it look smoother, but I understand, like, you can see, especially up to a point in the manga, and especially in the anime actually does a great thing of refining the art style to the point where it flows better, as from an animation standpoint, but also when need be, when moments are supposed to be high intensity, high action, it more so blends with the manga, where it has this rougher feel, this rougher aesthetic to it. I think that's very, very good to do, and it's very, very difficult to do from an animation's perspective. Now, no, I'm not an animator, but simply watching a lot of the fights in the anime, such as Jogo versus Gojo, such as Todo and Itadori versus Hanami, such as any of the fights really, especially the last fight right before the end of the anime with Nobara and Itadori versus the two cursed children, I think all of these moments have that good blending of the more smooth Mappa animation style and the much more chaotic, much more almost sketchy style of the manga. I think that's great. I think the author and the animators do a fantastic job with the art style and how it's presented. I think all that wonderful. Then we have to move on to the story itself. Now, here's one thing where I have both, I like it and I kind of don't like it. Here's the thing. The story is very, not necessarily predictable. And predictable isn't the word, but I feel like the story itself at times, that's the thing. Actually, no, that's the opposite problem. It's not necessarily predictable. I feel like I get sucker punched a bit too often. And by sucker punched, I mean like the transitions between certain arcs aren't necessarily the smoothest, to the point where one time I was reading and then we transitioned into an arc that happens in the manga, and I was like, did I like skip something? There are a lot of times in Jujutsu Kaisen where I feel like big leaps have been taken and there wasn't necessarily enough leading up to that big leap. I think it happens a lot early in the story. I think it happens kind of often in the manga. Like, we will be on something and then lead to something completely different, and that's the one issue I have with the story. It's a realistic kind of thing, because sometimes life just changes like that. But from a storytelling perspective, once again, this is because I am very, very simple. I need I need the author to grab me by the hand and drag me along sometimes, and sometimes it was a bit slow. So I think at times the author's style of being like, you know what, we're gonna hop into a new arc, and I'm like, wait, but weren't we just talking about something? Then we'll hop into a new arc. And while I think the story in of itself, when we're in an arc, it does a fantastic job of giving a story. I think the entire arc between the two schools, that does perfectly. I think in the moment, that story's fantastic. Just think this is a rough jump. I think the time between missions of them being Jujutsu sorcerers, them being students, all of that, very, very good. I think all of the moments in the manga, see, I try to hold myself back from spoiling the manga. I'm definitely going to do manga only videos because I want to talk about the manga, because honestly, another thing I'll say about Jujutsu Kaisen's story, it gets better and better the more it goes along, because the author seems to get more and more comfortable of manipulating characters into certain ways that feel realistic in order to drive the story. I think that's very, very good. The author's fantastic at doing that. That's very difficult to do, because honestly, to keep a story on a constant evolution track, you have to do one of two things. You either have to keep introducing more characters to add on to your current cast so they can bring new dynamics into existing ones, or you have to put your characters in situations with other existing characters that challenge them more on a fundamental level. And I'll say that the mangaka sort of does both. He will constantly introduce characters that you've never seen before, and they will interact with our new characters that already exist characters that already exist in a new interesting way. But also at the same time, he'll take older characters that have been around for a while and challenge them fundamentally by putting them in these tough situations for both protagonists and antagonists. He does a fantastic job with that. So I think story-wise, only issue I have, sometimes we jump like weird times. There are weird jumps which I don't want to spoil because some of them happen in the anime, but they're not as bad in the anime. I think Mappa did a good job of like sort of tweaking it, sort of adding those little transition points to make the story flow better. So I wonder if they're going to do the same for the manga, when they adapt the rest of the manga. But even then, during the story itself, when I'm in the moment, when I'm going chapter by chapter or anime episode by anime episode, it's very, very good story-wise. I think the story flows really, really well. I think the characters interact very, very well within the story. Let's hit one more thing. Actually, no, two more things. First things first, the power system. Now, I do like cursed energy a lot, but due to the extremely vague nature of cursed energy, some things just feel weird. I'm not gonna lie. There's times where I'm like, okay. And I understand, like, when you're doing a system like that, you gotta expect random things, especially since cursed energy usage varies from person to person. There are people who don't even have it and use it in different ways. There's a ton of that. But sometimes, when a new power gets introduced, I'm like, And that's the good thing. I think a flexible system is better than a non-flexible system. That's why I think I like bending, I like ki, I like chakra a lot more than systems that are locked, because they allow for more flexibility. But at times, the only byproduct of a cost that comes with something like that is that on occasion, something will be introduced that just kind of feels weird. Like, when Black Flash was first introduced, I was super happy to see it because it gave Yuji a necessary power-up. But I was like, huh? What? Like, there are times when powers get introduced that feel like they have almost no build-up to them. They just pop out of nowhere. Like if you stretch your mind wide enough, if you fatten your brain enough, it can make sense. But at times I just feel like Akutame Sensei is like, you know what? This would be cool. And he throws it in there. And that works out fine. I think it's cool enough. And I think there are some abilities that I love. Like Limitless, basically all of Gojo's abilities, fantastic. I think Toto's ability is great. I think a lot of these different abilities that the characters have access to are cool once they're introduced. But I think the only thing that I struggle with on occasion is their introduction. That's it. And let's talk about the fights. The fights are some of the most gritty, realistic, feel like, man, even in the manga, like before the anime even came out, well, before certain fights in the anime even came out, because I'll admit, I started reading Jujutsu Kaisen because y'all recommended it to me. I think what happened was I realized how these fights feel heavy. Like, it's weird to describe the fights in Jujutsu Kaisen. It's the same way I describe a fight in Dragon Ball. Like, everything, well, Dragon Ball Z and some fights in Super. But the thing is, when I say a fight has weight to it, like every single swing has impact. Every single activation of a technique seems to flow. The fights in Jujutsu Kaisen flow not only with a sense of weight, but also a sense of rhythm, whether it be in how the panel's drawn, how the animators animate it. Every single fight feels present. Like I'm there 2 feet away watching two people swing on each other, or two people double team another person, or someone get their head ripped off in the case of Gojo versus Jogo. I think all of that is very, very good for establishing a world like that, because once again, it ties into how realistic, deep, and meaty this story is. And honestly, that's where I'm going to stop for now, because I think there's so much really I'm going to talk about more in depth. I'm definitely going to hit on all these topics individually, whether it be from the character standpoint to the story standpoint, all these in their own little separate videos. So I'm very excited, and that's why I'm excited for Jujutsu Kaisen. It has so much potential already. It's 144 chapters deep as of the time I'm recording this video, I do believe. Hold on, let me check. I have checked, I am indeed correct. It is 144 chapters deep, and I can tell this thing has a lot of potential. I know Sensei said he was planning to end in about 2 years. I can definitely see the manga ending. It's definitely on its way to, well, it's possibly able to wrap up. That's the thing, depending on how the Sensei wants to take it. It's all about what Sensei wants to do with it. But in summation, that's why I'm so excited for Jujutsu Kaisen. I think it's a really, really good series. I think it has a lot of potential in all of its aspects. There's some flaws, there's some issues, but they aren't big enough to maybe be like, oh, this is a bad series. Oh, this is not a good series at all. I do believe it deserves a lot of its hype. Is it the best thing ever? No. But that doesn't mean it's not very, very good. But tell me, what do you guys think about Jujutsu Kaisen in the comment section down below? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please tell me. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off.